Welcome to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm Egan, the owner of Caravan Digital. We're a digital marketing agency for e-commerce brands. And today I have on Gen Furukawa of Prehook. Gen, tell us a little bit about your experience and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, totally. Egan, thanks so much for having me. Like we were just talking about earlier, we had met a few years ago at a conference in Austin for the Dynamite Circle. And at the time I was just kind of like doing my own consulting for brands in terms of onboarding. And I got into that because I was leading the marketing team at Jungle Scout, which is an Amazon product research tool. So it's focusing on learning how to kind of grow a SaaS business. But that's kind of like relevant to what I'm doing now, which is working on Prehook. So I'm a co-founder of Prehook, which is a quiz platform for Shopify merchants. So we help merchants improve conversion rate, accelerate list growth, and capture zero-party data. And so I'm working with two of the early founding team, the devs who built the first version of the web app at Jungle Scout. So we've been working together a long time and in the e-commerce SaaS space for a while. And it's obviously changing rapidly. We launched in 2021, and even during that time, the necessity and the urgency of brands to capture their own data and build relationships directly with customers has changed enormously as a result of iOS 14, iOS 15, third-party data, third-party cookies being deprecated, and just kind of like this focus on privacy. Ad costs are increasing. So what was a reliable playbook for a high growth for direct-to-consumer brands has changed a lot based on what marketing channels are efficient and scalable. So yeah, we're doing quite well in helping merchants to capture this data and do a lot with it, because I think in 2022 and beyond, personalization and building a strong customer experience is going to be one of the key differentiators and ways that brands will succeed in an increasingly saturated market.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just to highlight that, you've been in e-commerce for over 10 years, it looks like. And Jungle Scout, like you mentioned, that's kind of one of the premier SaaS tools in e-commerce. That's a really big name. A lot of people will recognize that. So you really got some deep experience here. So we're excited to have you on.
Yeah, e-commerce SaaS. I mean, I have been on the brand side. I was at a private equity firm where there were a couple portfolio companies that were kind of e-commerce. So it's been an interesting perspective where I get kind of like the high level behind the scenes perspective of, what brands are doing and their marketing, what's working there. But then also on the enablement and the tool side, which is where I'm at now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned you guys are working with zero-party data. Can you share a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So zero-party data is data that's shared directly and willingly with customers. And so contrast that with first-party data. First-party data, everybody is gathering, and it's more of a passive consumption of data. So that's stuff like a location or stuff about the customer, like what they've purchased, their transaction history, maybe their lifetime value. So if it's a VIP customer or first-time customer, and then also just engagement statistics and data like what pages they've visited, or abandoned cart or abandoned checkout, email engagement. These are all things that are important, and there's a lot that you can do with it. But the big difference is that you're not getting the intent. So if, say, for example, Egan is buying a moisturizer, from that data, like we know that you've bought it and it might cost $30 and you've purchased it one time, but we don't know much about you from there. We don't know if you're buying it for yourself, or if you're, what skin type you have, or what challenges you're having, what problems you're trying to solve. And that's where the quiz comes in, is because we're able to just ask you a few questions. And with those few questions, it can completely change how the product is positioned and how you are being communicated to as a customer.
Gotcha. So zero-party data, in some sense, you can contrast that with third-party data. And you mentioned iOS 14. So something like the Facebook pixel or the Google, Google tracking, would that technically be third-party data if that's, running in the background on your website?
Yeah, exactly. And so the difference there with third-party data, where you're kind of like, you're saying, I want to target people in Madison, Wisconsin, who are, in their 30s and with a household income of this. where does that data come from? And so Facebook buys their data, but then they're also using data that you're telling them. So then they're able to hone in, okay, so this is an ad that will be relevant to Egan. But the challenge if you're running ad campaigns off of third-party data is the source of the data and like the recency of the data. And so essentially it can be inaccurate. And if you're running ads that aren't targeted well, then you probably will be seeing ads that are lower on relevancy. They're getting higher cost per clicks as a result. And therefore you're just spending more on ads and cost per acquisition is increasing. So if you're able to capture this data, and we can go through a screen share later on like what it actually looks like and how brands are tactically using it, you're able to create far more targeted campaigns. And also like the content, the type of emails, the segmentation that you're running is going to be that much better.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving us the high level there. So kind of this is in an era where maybe the platforms we buy ads from like Facebook and Instagram, they're going to have less data. They're going to run into challenges as Apple fights them in terms of what data they have or what they can share. So for us as brands or agencies, we want to help the brands we work with basically gather their own data about their customers so that they can better market to, message them, serve them, and sell to them. Is that right?
Exactly. And so it also is a shift in the means of communication, the channels that you're running. So if you've probably used, you're a full scale agency, so you are running marketing campaigns on owned media, which might be an email or an SMS, and then rented media. And that's where you're buying ads on a particular platform. But the challenge there is you're kind of at the whim of, say, rising ad costs and targeting that might not be as good. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride for sure. And like one small indication is Facebook dropping 20% in value overnight, just based on, the revenue numbers being revealed and declining precipitously, kind of as a result of this market shift, this shift in marketing dollars, because ads just weren't performing. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of it on hearing from your customers and you being hands-on with these campaigns.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are you seeing in terms of successful brands using zero-party data like this in their own marketing?
Yeah, so there is, like I was saying earlier, like our focus is to help brands build a relationship with customers. And so ultimately it comes down to improving dollars. Top line revenue is kind of like the key metric that brands are looking for. So we have seen when you compare in Google Analytics, the segment of those who have taken the quiz versus those who have not, significantly higher in some of the key metrics, average order value, improved conversion rate, and cost per lead. So yeah, the brands that are doing well might start their customer journey by having showing the customer a quiz. So this could be on the homepage, it could be in the header nav, it could be in the footer nav, it could be a landing page for an ad, a paid ad. And basically, you're playing to a customer's curiosity. So, like, hey, Egan, what's your perfect coffee, or what's your favorite coffee, or your wine. It could be any number of things, but like, hey, let me help you learn about yourself. And then you're kind of like starting Egan down the funnel. And it starts with just a few simple questions, kind of like micro conversions, easy to answer, but ideally critical data that will help kind of like on the back end in marketing.
Yeah. And maybe do you prefer red wine or white wine? Do you like drier or sweeter? Maybe like information about that, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly one of the quizzes. What is it called? Wink. WINC is kind of like a direct-to-consumer subscription wine brand. And that's exactly the question that they have. It's like an easy one. Okay, let's get in there. But the beauty of a quiz is that it just replicates the experience of an in-store sales associate. So with some simple questions, like, I don't necessarily know what tannic structure I like, or what if I like oaky or not. I don't know. But I do know if I like chocolate, or I do know if I like cherries and I don't like strawberries. And so these are kind of proxies that can help you understand, the brand, understand, what would be good for me. And it's especially important with a brand like Wink where it's a subscription e-commerce brand. So every order that's being sent has to be on par with my expectations. Otherwise, I could easily churn out. And so it's kind of like that also trickles down to the marketing campaigns of, if I'm sending you an SMS, or if I'm sending you like a post quiz or a welcome flow, it would be far better if I'm sending you content around white wine, if that's what you like, and maybe even more specifically a Chardonnay, if that's what you've identified as something that you like, as opposed to kind of like a one size fits all campaign blast, which just doesn't have the relevancy and therefore won't have the engagement.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's very interesting where it's like we're gathering our own data because we can't necessarily get it from the big ad platforms anymore, right? We're going to help personalize the messaging. And I see this can also help with opt-in rates. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that is basically just back of the envelope math. So if you consider maybe, I think like Klaviyo's stats, they have a benchmark of, it might be like 2 to 5% opt-in rate, which is basically on a pop-up or on a page, hey, add your email to join our VIP club, or add an email to get 10% off your first purchase. So there are a couple issues with that. The discount, first of all, is not an ideal opt-in because it is a direct margin drain. So you're losing money off the bat, 10%, and that's coming from the bottom line. You're maybe devaluing the brand equity where you're positioning yourself as a discount brand. Or, if I don't opt in now, then I might just add it to cart and wait. Or maybe those are more sophisticated like e-commerce buyers who might know to expect a discount. But if that is your hook to get in, it's just not as effective as opposed to a proposition of adding value up front. And I think that's where the quiz is a really fundamental exchange of value, where the value to you is that will improve your shopping experience and will help you learn about yourself and maybe learn about your problems and your product. The value to me, if I'm the brand, is that I'm getting your contact information and I'm learning a lot about you. So that's where, the verse, a regular opt-in where you're just getting an email is, I mean, that's kind of like hard to put context around and to understand what should I send to Egan? Because I all I know is like, his email and how to reach him.
That makes sense. And I'm going to guess too, when you take the quiz or when a user takes the quiz, do they put in their contact information at the end where they've kind of already answered the questions? Now they want some information, some personalization, then they put in their contact info at the end. Is that how it works?
It could be either way. Generally, that's how most of the brands will do it, is ask simple questions up front, get the customer more engaged and invested in the quiz. Ideally, starting with simple questions, maybe like, what's your name? Things that don't require a lot of thought or don't put me on my heels immediately. And then, obviously, like ramping up the level of intimacy or maybe the value of the data that you're gathering. And then at the end, asking for an email and or an SMS. And you can also make it optional, which some brands do, because the belief on their end is they just want to make it like kind of the best customer experience possible. And if they don't want to opt in, then they don't have to.
You could guide someone to products without necessarily getting their contact information to market to them further. Yeah,
totally.
That makes sense. Is there any tips you can share in terms of what questions to ask? How do we get the right data for personalization?
Yeah, I think it depends on the brand, obviously. In building a quiz, I think that the shorter the quiz, the better. I think if you can reduce the number of fluffy questions, like if you were seasoned, what season would you be? Or what's your favorite flower? These are things that aren't helpful. And as you can imagine, with every question, the completion rate would drop. And so you want to maintain engagement throughout so that people don't drop off. But at a high level, I think, what questions would you want to ask? You'd want to think about how are you going to use the data? And so that could be in creating segments on the back end. So that could be, what, if it's a skincare brand, maybe what type of skin they're having, what skin challenges are they having? Is it rosacea, acne, blackheads, or dry skin, whatever. Then it might be something about the routine. It might be something about the goals. And so I think if you can think of how the data would play into how you're marketing communication would work, then that's kind of like the ideal sweet spot.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. We use ConvertKit for our email marketing, our B2B email marketing, and we've looked into tools like Write Message in the past that kind of take people down. Hey, even if you're a service provider and someone's looking for, are they looking for SEO? Are they looking for Google Ads? Are they looking for email marketing? That's all valuable stuff. And then you can put them into flows related to that. Same story in e-commerce with Klaviyo.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, our tool Prehook integrates directly with Klaviyo, OmniSend, Attentive, and PostScript, because that's where a lot of the data is most helpful, is in these communication tools, email and SMS.
Absolutely. This is great context, Gen. Can you also show us Prehook a little bit? What does this look like, just so people can get a sense of what would it look like to implement this for their brand?
All right. So we have, this is a Prehook dashboard. I don't necessarily want to get too